You ever looked at your phone or a satellite and just thought to yourself, I mean, how is that even possible? How did a human being create that? How did an animal on Earth with just the materials that are on Earth come together to create such a complex thing? Well, I've wondered that, and I wonder it all the time when I see all the amazing things that humans have created. Even look at the pyramids or something. Like, we as humans in the modern day, we can't even comprehend the idea that somehow they came together and created that, to the point where we have to come up with theories of like aliens or divine intervention, which their scale really grants the ability to speculate on that. So in today's video, I wanted to track humans from our earliest technological advances and how they kind of all play into each other, and how they've led up to all this exponential and amazing technological advancement, meaning satellites. I'll be taking us to satellites, which to me is the ultimate expression of human curiosity and ingenuity. It really all starts with fire, which to me at least is the first time in the 3.7 billion year history of life that an animal really took the reins of history, meaning that an animal, as in humans, kind of took over the march of progress, whereas before it was really only led by our DNA and our genes continuing to adapt over millions of years. The chain reaction caused by harnessing fire could really never be understated. Firstly, it's going to enable us to cook our food, which is going to make it so we use less calories eating it and less calories digesting it. And the more calorie dense our food becomes, the more calories we can allocate to other parts of our body, which means our brain, which means our brains continue to grow at a faster rate. It also meant we could hold meat for longer periods of time. By cooking it, not everything would just rot immediately. All of a sudden, food sources became a little bit more abundant. It also let humans spread all over the world into colder climates and kind of leave just that savanna Africa type of environment. And it literally unlocked the night. When you think about it, like before humans had the fire, it was literally, you couldn't do anything at night. It was literally just pitch black. Like night now is a little bit different with all the light pollution. Like literally was completely pitch black. If there wasn't a big moon at the time, I mean, it's just so hard to imagine how terrifying that would be. Because not only that, there's also animals that are actively trying to kill you at the time, especially if you're on the African savanna, and you just have to deal with that in the pitch black. Not down with that. Unlocking the night meant more than just not being terrified for that time. It also gave us extra hours to work on things. These things might be inventing something new. Maybe fucking Groot's playing with some rocks and sticks, and all of a sudden he finds a new way to do something. And just little things like that are gonna start to add up. And over, hundreds of thousands of years, they do add up. They make a big difference. It also allows us to converse. You have to think about this. Before the fire, there was no time in humans' day that was incentivized to sit down and just talk about things. When everything's about food and calories and, death is really approaching at any minute if you can't find the right food. Because of that, you really don't have any time during the day to just sit around. I mean, certainly there probably were times, but at night, what else were you gonna do? Your only option was to sit around the fire and either work on a task or talk to somebody. This was going to start to accelerate the progress of culture and religion and kind of just a more complex form of social cohesion. Human society before the Industrial Revolution was all about food, even in the medieval times, all the way back to what I'm talking about. And having an excess of food meant that you could convert it into other resources through trade, which is why agriculture is such a monumental moment in human history. Humans no longer had to search and scratch for every calorie. Instead, they could begin producing it themselves and at a more stable rate. And for the first time in human history, we could produce in excess of it. It's possible that 5 humans could produce food for 10 humans, leaving those other 5 humans with time in the day to become specialized in other tasks. In addition, because they didn't have to move, all of a sudden, their settlements became more and more permanent, and they became more and more advanced. With that became a larger population, meaning more people that could specialize. Along with that came something that, as a person who really likes humans, I'm not a huge fan of, which is hierarchy and ownership. All of a sudden, you could actually own something. In a hunter-gatherer society, I mean, you lose your favorite rock, all of a sudden you just lost your whole net worth. Now there's much more defined things to own. You could actually own land. Owning a certain amount of land meant something. Whereas before, it was kind of hard to tell like what mattered, and when you have to carry all your shit, you don't really even care about those kind of extra things that would be valuable. What ownership and hierarchy did do was actually lead to much more innovation, because all of a sudden, you had people that controlled resources and power that desperately wanted to hold on to those resources and power from other people trying to gain it, which in turn led to them advancing and kind of coming up with new ways to protect their power. War itself is going to lead to a ton of human advancement over every step of the video I'm about to cover. Just think of the Cold War, for instance. But now that we have all this extra time and knowledge and resources, how can we take advantage of it? By writing it down. For the first time in human history, knowledge can exist outside of the human brain. Before, ancestors would have to explain everything in great detail over an entire lifetime. Now, it can all be written down and saved and preserved and sent over thousands of miles. A trader could send a request 100 miles away and save himself an extra trip. With all of this ownership and writing, naturally came in math. So all of a sudden now, governments and people in power had to kind of take stock of what they had. They had to know exactly how much land was where. And when you're gonna have a transaction, you need to know exact amounts. So math naturally started to evolve from here. Math developing in the background will have a huge effect on this entire story. Metallurgy was bound to have the biggest effect yet. First, it was copper, because it has a low melting point, so these original blacksmiths could kind of just fuck around with it with fire, and they could see that, you know, certain shiny rocks, they could be broken down and become something else. As the blacksmiths advanced, they combined copper and tin to create bronze, which is a much more sturdy metal. And to my point about war, this began the Bronze Age, which the Bronze Age is when all of a sudden these armies are equipped with bronze weapons, and if you were one of the ones that weren't equipped with bronze weapons, then you were fucked. So that meant all of these civilizations all of a sudden had to pour all these resources into kind of getting to the next tech. But iron is the real breakthrough, because iron is everywhere. Whereas copper and tin, they're very spread out, kind of hard to access, but iron is everywhere. All three of the things mentioned before made metallurgy possible. Fire, a food surplus, and knowledge passed down through generations outside of the human mind. Now, metallurgy was gonna last for a very long time. Metallurgy is kind of the natural stopping point. We as humans were able to progress with metal and form it in different ways, and eventually steel will kind of come along, and while very hard to make, it is technically an upgrade, and you know, we'll find different ways to form it into stuff and make it so we're kind of advancing. But we don't really see the next huge tech jump until we get to electricity, which is all the way in the 18th century, meaning for thousands of years, humans were literally kind of stuck at the same point. Qualifications could definitely be made to that argument. In the 18th century, humans realized that static shock is the same element that lightning is. In the 1830s, Faraday finds out that spinning magnets near wire creates current, which every power plant on Earth today still uses that same concept. Towards the end of the 1800s, power grids and light bulbs kind of go mainstream, which kind of like fire, but in a much more industrialized sense, unlocked the night. Before, you know, cities would kind of shut down at night. You know, you could have lamps and shit, but it's really not the same as the entire city being illuminated. It made it so workers' rights could be trampled all over and workers could go all the way through the night because the factories could be lit up. But perhaps most importantly, it's going to make it so we can send knowledge over long distances. Similar to writing, transmitting knowledge is incredibly important. And the radio coming along and telegraph is going to have a huge effect. All of a sudden, you can send information across continents without wasting precious time. This would also eventually lead to the computer, where all of a sudden we have another thing outside of the human mind that can process information for us. What you'll realize throughout this video, you realize it's all about how can we process and send information quickly. And the march of progress is pretty much only as linear as how quickly we can send information. That's why we see this exponential growth in the modern day, because all of a sudden information is everywhere and it can be accessed at any moment from any place on Earth, because we really all build off ourselves as humans. To backtrack a little bit, in 1687, Isaac Newton, without knowing, lays the groundwork for all of modern day physics with his laws of motion. In 1926, Robert Goddard launches the first liquid-fueled rocket. It only goes up 40 feet, which finally leads us to Sputnik, the first man-made object in space. The metallurgy of the hull to survive the stress, the electronics transmit signals back and forth to make sure that the mission is going correctly, and took countless hours of math to plan out the trajectory, and fuel chemistry for the energy. And there's a lot of amazing people in between when you think about it. I mean, just the millions, the billions of humans that participated in this march of progress, and you know, the geniuses that were forward-thinking and able to take the information of our ancestors and turn it into something that we had never even thought of prior to it. So as much as things might feel inevitable in hindsight, you know, it took somebody making that transition. It took somebody, you know, harnessing fire for the first time, who, you know, they'll never get credit for that. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look around, that is their credit, is, you know, the point we're at now. So there's a quick explanation of why you're looking at satellites and phones, and you know, it was rather concise, I know. Only tapped on about 4 or 5 different huge changes, but they all kind of play into each other, and you know, there's a lot of small moments in between that really explain a lot of humanity's increases. So, thank you for watching. Have a good one.